What's going on, guys? Welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to talk about some things that you have to get to know to really uncover your full potential. Getting to know these will empower you to have more time, better prioritization, and more overall energy to do what really matters to you and what's going to be getting you closer to any and all of your goals rather than far away. So that sounds pretty important. So let's get right into it. What I'm talking about here is your bad habits, and specifically your bad habits, because bad habits are unique from person to person. We've all developed different habits. Some of them are intentionally developed because we label them as good habits and we intentionally want to be doing these things every day, maybe reading, meditating, exercising. And some of them are unintentional. They develop and they kind of spiral out of control and take up a lot of our time and a lot of our energy, and we might not even really know about these things. They kind of slip under the radar and just become normalized in our lives. Now, your bad habits are unique to you because only you can decide what is a bad habit for yourself. Two people can have the same habit, and for one person it can be bad, can negatively impact them and their movement towards their goals, and for the other person it's just a habit. It's not necessarily bad. It doesn't actually hinder them. So this is why you have to really take the time to uniquely self-reflect on this topic and understand what your bad habits are. You have to ask yourself, what are my habits that are detrimental to me and my progress? So I'm going to give you guys a bunch of questions, a bunch of leading questions to guide you towards coming to recognize for yourself what your bad habits are. I have a pretty good idea of what a lot of bad habits are for some people, but it might not necessarily be a bad habit to you. So you have to go ahead and decide for yourself, is this actually detrimental? But it's important to be authentic. Don't be self-deceptive in this process. It can be really convenient and easy to convince yourself, oh, smoking weed every day is not a bad habit that I have. It doesn't actually affect me. But realistically, if you weren't to smoke, maybe your energy levels would be a lot higher when you wake up in the morning and you'd be able to get a lot more done, etc., etc. That's just an example. So be very authentic and honest with yourself. So here's a couple questions that you can go ahead and ask yourself to determine what your bad habits are. What consumes my time that I don't actually value? So maybe that's spending a lot of time on social media. Maybe that's gossiping with friends. Maybe that's sinking a lot of time into video games. Maybe that's trading time for money in a way that you don't feel aligned with right now. Another one, what is something that I do that makes me feel worse rather than better across a long-term horizon? And that point of across a long-term horizon is very important, because if we're thinking short-term with that question, maybe exercise makes you feel worse rather than better because it takes up your energy a little bit. And after you exercise, even though you get some endorphins, you feel more tired. But obviously exercising is a good habit. It's not a bad habit. So it's important, it's very relevant here to think across the big picture. Maybe social media makes you feel good in the moment. It gives you that rush of dopamine, but in the long term, it makes you feel like shit. So ask yourself that question and keep in mind that aspect of across a long-term time horizon. What makes me feel worse rather than better across a long-term time horizon? Another question you can ask yourself, what are things that I do that get me further away from my goals rather than closer to them? Now, with a lot of these questions, you might have some overlapping answers, and that's okay. Like compulsive social media use might fall into all three of these categories, and that's perfect. That actually is an indicator that is one of the main bad habits that you have, maybe the biggest one. So if the same answer is coming up again in multiple of these questions, then that's an indicator that those are probably some of your worst habits. So those are just a few questions. Those are 3 good questions that you can ask yourself to start to identify what your really bad habits are. And a lot of the times they're very obvious things. Like I said, social media use, video games, maybe not eating healthy. Those are bad habits, not getting good sleep. But there's more subtle things also. Like I mentioned, trading your time for money in a way that you don't feel aligned with. I would argue that that would be a bad habit. That's something that you don't actually value. Now, if it's just a means to an end, if you're saving up some money to, kickstart a situation where you can shift your life situation so that that's not the case, you can start to develop a business once you've accumulated a little bit of capital from a part-time job, that's different. But if it's an unconscious, unintentional habit that you've developed where you're beginning to normalize trading your time for money in a way that you don't align with, that's something to be very weary of. I would say that's a bad habit, and you have to become very aware of that. So there's a lot of subtle habits. I think I mentioned like wasting your time gossiping with friends. Maybe spending your time with friends who aren't actually good for you in the direction of your life, right? Maybe that's one of your answers to the third question of what is something I do that gets me further away from my goals rather than closer to them. Maybe you're spending time with people that aren't good for the direction of your life, and you habitually do this. It's just become normalized now that this group of friends that you have has become your group of friends, and you don't question it even though they're not good for you in your life. So these are things to consider. You have to become very, very aware, especially of the subtle ways that you have your bad habits. Because something that I learned from James Clear is that habits are a double-edged sword. The bad ones can tear you down just as much as the good ones can build you up. So you have to be very aware of those bad habits. It's equally as important, if not more important, to avoid your bad habits and transcend those bad habits. I would say is a more appropriate goal to have. That's equally, if not more important than practicing your good habits. If you can do that, you can utilize what's called the law of subtraction. You can make the space in your life for the things that you are wanting by making more time to get yourself closer to those goals, by subtracting things out of your life that you're not necessarily aligned with and that don't necessarily serve you. So utilizing the law of subtraction by transcending these bad habits is a very tried and true way of getting you closer to and eventually fulfilling your goals. And now, before I end this video, I just want to touch on something that I just mentioned, that transcending your bad habits is a more appropriate goal when it comes to trying to fulfill all your other goals in life rather than avoiding them. The difference between avoidance and transcendence is that avoiding them implies you're still desiring them on one level of another. There's still a part of you that wants to go crawling back to those bad habits, that wants to go crawling back to that bottle of whiskey every night, or that joint, or those video games for a couple hours every day, and that bag of chips in the cupboard. It's much better to transcend those bad habits rather than to avoid them, because transcendence is getting to a place where those desires are no longer there. And once you're in a place of transcendence, there's not mental energy being expended to avoid those habits. And there's no part of you that's trying to pull you back in that direction. And I would say the best way to transcend your bad habits is firstly to become aware of them. That's step one. Once you've become deeply aware of them, you're already halfway there. Because once you free up more time and energy by dropping away your bad habits, you're going to be able to start employing better habits that are going to get you closer towards your goals, and that's going to feel so good. It's going to be so much more fruitful for you, and you're going to start to taste that fruit, so to speak. And once you do that, your bad habits are going to start to become left behind in the dust. Those desires will start to become more fleeting, more uncommon, and eventually they'll be more or less dead and buried. You won't have nearly as much of a desire to be participating in your bad habits anymore. Now, you might still have, a little bit of a pull every now and again, but that's where your conscious power of will comes in. Now that you're employed with the awareness of, just how much those bad habits limit your potential, you are going to be able to exercise a conscious power of will now that you've seen the other side. You've seen what life looks like without those bad habits. You're going to be able to consciously exercise your will to say no to those bad habits when every now and again that pull does arise. All right, guys, so that's it for this video. That your bad habits are very important to get to know, to fully uncover your potential. All right, guys, so that's about it for this video. I hope you actually take the time to put yourself through those 3 big questions to really uncover what your bad habits are. And doing that is very, very vital to uncovering your potential. You're going to have so much more time and energy to work towards your goals and fulfilling your ambitions in life. If you want to know more on habits, I highly recommend checking out a couple of my other videos. I'll put some links in the description for videos that are very relevant to this topic that I've made. And also checking out some of the work done by author James Clear. His book, Atomic Habits, is a very good read for anybody interested in this topic and wanting to improve their habits and get rid of their bad ones. And Tim Ferriss also has a lot of good work done on this topic. So those are some authors that I recommend you check out. And I'll link some of the other videos that I have on this topic in the description. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to give it a like, subscribe to my channel for more content like this, and let me know what you thought in the comments down below. Thanks for watching, guys. Take care. I'll see you in the next one.